The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character.
This looks like trash from a school lunchroom. My husband's sister didn't just say it out loud. She yelled it so hard that everyone at the table felt uncomfortable. Then she leaned back with a mean look on her face and said her own kids could cook better than this. The whole room went dead silent. Her oldest daughter got very tense. The younger girl started blinking fast because she was about to cry. My husband clenched his jaw. His mother looked like she wanted to disappear. I could feel my pulse in my head, but I kept my voice very steady. I lifted my glass and waited a moment until she thought she had won. Then I said in a quiet voice, "I didn't make dinner tonight, but someone you know did." If you had seen our lives a few years ago, you might have thought we were a perfect, normal family from a neighborhood ad. We lived on a quiet street on the outskirts of Portland. 2 houses were right next to each other. The kids ran back and forth between the yards all the time. We had dinner together often enough that it felt good. From the outside, it all looked very easy. I used to believe that too. Back then, I had a job in home styling. I picked out fabrics and room plans for people who wanted their houses to feel cozy. It was funny how I could do that for strangers, but inside my own family, I was always the one working hard to keep things peaceful. My husband was a good man who always tried to keep everyone happy. His mother was kind, but she was getting older and weaker every year, and she needed our help more than she wanted to say. And then there was his sister. She always wanted drama and acted like every family meeting was a stage for her. That was what started to break everything apart. When we first moved in next door to my mother-in-law, I thought it was a great plan. We were close enough to help her, but far enough away to have our own space. But the truth was that whenever my husband's sister came to visit, she brought her 4 children and immediately went to sit on the couch or look at a screen. She expected someone else to do all the parenting for her, and that person was almost always me. At first, I told myself it wasn't a problem. I like children. My boys liked their cousins, and I really cared about the 2 younger girls. They stayed close to me because they wanted to feel safe and cared for. I didn't stop to think about why they needed that so much. After a while, this became a habit, and then it became something everyone expected. If the kids were being loud or making a mess, people called me. If someone needed to cook a meal, they asked me. If his sister wanted some quiet time, she just walked away and left them behind. And because I wanted things to stay calm, I kept saying yes. But saying yes costs a lot. That dinner, where my husband's sister insulted the food she thought I made, wasn't the first time she treated me badly. But it was the first time she was so mean about it while her kids were right there. I looked at her younger daughter that night and saw her shoulders drop. She looked like she already knew what it felt like to be embarrassed. Right then, something changed inside me. It started small, but there was no going back to how things were before. After that meal, the feeling between our 2 houses was different. It wasn't a fast change, but everyday things felt tighter and more uncomfortable. My husband's sister acted like nothing was wrong. She walked in and out of her mother's house with her usual confidence, thinking the world still moved however she wanted. But her kids felt the change, and so did I. Even my husband felt it. Small things felt harder. Whenever her kids came over, they brought a lot of noise and mess. It wasn't because they were bad kids, but they were just trying to get someone to pay attention to them since their mother rarely did. Her 2 boys would wrestle in the living room, while the 2 younger girls just stayed near me. They were the kind of kids who wanted comfort, but didn't know how to ask for it. Their mom would just sit there, looking at her phone as if taking care of her children was a hobby she was tired of. I tried to stay away, but you can't really do that when kids need help. One afternoon, I saw the younger girl sitting on my back porch. She was drawing a circle in the dirt with her shoe. She didn't even look up when I came out. She just asked in a very quiet voice, "Do you think Mom was mad at us that night?" That question made it hard for me to breathe for a moment. Because that night at dinner, His sister didn't know that her daughters had helped make the food she hated. They had spent an hour washing the vegetables and stirring the pot. They were laughing and having fun. They were so proud of what they made, and she ruined that pride without even looking at them. I sat down next to her on the step. I told her I didn't think her mom was mad at them, but that she just wasn't thinking about how her words hurt. The girl swallowed hard and said her mom never thinks about that. It wasn't loud or angry. It was just a sad truth from a child who was old enough to know she wasn't the most important thing in her mother's world. Later that night, I told my husband what she said. He rubbed his face like he was tired of always making excuses for his sister out of habit. He said things were getting worse and that she didn't even see what she was doing. Then the real change happened. A few days later at school pickup, the younger girl walked away from her mom and came straight to me. Her mom didn't even notice because she was busy arguing with someone on her phone. The girl grabbed my sleeve and whispered, "Can we come to your house tonight? I don't want to mess anything up again." That word again really hurt to hear. It's one thing to be embarrassed by a parent, but it's another thing to believe it's your fault. Kids shouldn't have to carry that kind of fear. That was the real turning point for me. It wasn't the mean dinner or her sister's attitude. It was seeing a child who didn't think she could ever make her own mother happy. I knew then that I couldn't just stay neutral anymore. The total collapse of our family dynamic didn't happen with a lot of yelling. Instead, it started with a casual announcement, the kind you'd make if you were just talking about the weather. One afternoon, my husband's sister walked into his mother's living room, tossed her bag onto the floor, and told us she was getting a divorce. She said she'd be moving into the house the following week. She had already decided that the study would be her bedroom and that her 2 daughters would take the guest space. She said they would figure out the rest later. Just like that, there was no talk, no plan, and no thought for anyone else. My mother-in-law just sat there with her mouth open, and my husband looked like someone had slapped him across the face. Her girls stood frozen by the door, still holding onto their backpacks. Then she turned to me. She always did this when she wanted to treat me like a servant under the guise of family loyalty. She told me that while she was living there, I would be the one handling all the meals for everyone. She said it was only fair since her brother works, she works, and our mother is too tired. She told me I could take this on because I only worked part-time. Then she offered me $115 a month and said that should cover it. Her boldness was actually hard to believe. I felt a stillness come over me, not anger or shock, but a feeling that the ground had permanently shifted. I told her quietly that I had my own home to run, my own children to care for, and my own job. I told her I couldn't take on the cooking and cleaning for her whole household, too. She just laughed at me and said that part-time isn't a real job. She said I was already cooking for my family anyway, and that I should just make more food. She told me I should be grateful she was even paying me. That word, grateful, almost made me laugh because it was so disconnected from reality. At that point, the thin thread that kept me trying to please her finally snapped. My husband stepped in with a hard tone I'd rarely heard him use on his sister. He told her to stop talking to me like I was her employee and pointed out that I had done more for her kids lately than she had. I saw that hit her, but instead of thinking about it, she just doubled down. She crossed her arms and said we were unbelievable for attacking her when she was just asking for help. From that day on, things spiraled out of control. She moved into my mother-in-law's house with piles of boxes, leaving them in the hallways and making messes everywhere. She would disappear for hours, claiming she had things to take care of, while her girls sat quietly in the living room, waiting for anyone to ask how their day was. She'd come home late and irritated, slamming doors. Her boys were staying with their father, which only made her mood worse. I stopped stepping in to help, not because I was being mean, but because I had to. Every boundary I set was met with her making fun of me, but I didn't budge. If she wanted food, she had to make it. If she needed a babysitter, she had to find one. She wasn't used to hearing the word no. As her frustration grew, the girls became more and more withdrawn. I started taking notes on everything, not to use them as a weapon, but to understand the pattern of how we got to this breaking point. I knew something was coming. The warning arrived on a gray, heavy morning in Portland, the kind of day that feels chilly and quiet. My mother-in-law called me first, her voice shaking. She told me that her daughter was coming back that day and that she sounded defeated. I never thought of that woman as defeated. She usually walked into a room like she owned the air itself. She didn't get defeated, she just got louder and meaner. But this time was different. By the afternoon, her car pulled into the driveway. She got out slowly, her hands in her pockets and her eyes looking hollow. Her 2 daughters were inside my house at the time, helping my boys build a cardboard fort to stay safe from whatever emotional storm was brewing next door. I watched from my doorway as she dragged herself to her mother's steps. She stood there for a second to brace herself, then walked in. A few moments later, my mother-in-law called me again, begging me to come over. I found the 2 of them in the living room. My mother-in-law was on the edge of the couch, and her daughter was standing by the window, her arms rigid like she was trying to hold herself together. She said, "They're gone." When her mother asked who, she whispered that all of them were gone. She said their father had been given full custody of the boys and the girls. Her voice cracked as she explained that the kids told the judge they didn't want to come back to her. She turned away from the window, and for the first time she didn't look angry or proud, she looked panicked. She whispered that the kids said they were happier without her. My mother-in-law covered her mouth with her shaking hands. I just stood there, letting the heavy truth settle in the room. My husband's sister kept talking, her voice getting higher. She said their father told the judge he could provide stability and a calm home where the kids felt secure. He told the court she was distracted and overwhelmed. When her mother asked if she had talked to the kids, she snapped that they didn't want to talk to her and wouldn't even look at her in court. Silence filled the room. Then she spun toward me, looking for someone to blame. She asked if this was what I wanted. I didn't say anything yet. She took a step toward me, her voice full of bitterness. She accused me of always stepping in and acting like I knew her kids better than she did. Her mother tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen. She hissed that I must be thrilled that the kids preferred me and suggested that maybe I should just raise them myself. Something inside me snapped when she said those things, but it wasn't anger or a need to defend myself. It was something cleaner, the truth. I stepped forward and closed the gap between us. I lowered my voice so that she would have to hear every single syllable. I told her quietly that I never had any interest in replacing her. I only wanted her children to feel like they were loved. She shouted back at me that they were loved. I asked her then if she remembered that dinner, the one where she told everyone the food looked like it had been scraped off a cafeteria tray. I watched as the color drained out of her face. I reminded her how she mocked that meal in front of the whole family and in front of her own kids. She didn't bother to ask who cooked it or even look at her children's faces. I told her very softly that her daughters had made that dinner for her. They had spent nearly an hour carefully rinsing the vegetables and stirring the broth, giggling every time they splashed a little water on each other. They were so incredibly proud of what they had done, and she crushed that pride before they could even hand her a plate. A breath hitched in her throat. My mother-in-law pressed a hand against her chest and whispered, "Oh, sweetheart." But my husband's sister just stared at me, looking stunned, as if she was hearing the memory for the very first time. I told her that the girls told me later they thought they had ruined everything. They believed they had embarrassed her and that they were failures. Her eyes started to glisten. She asked me why I didn't tell her. I told her that I had been trying to get her to listen for years, but she never listened to me or to them. She shook her head weakly and took a step back. She said she was stressed and was juggling so many things and that I had no idea. I told her that was true. I didn't know everything she was dealing with. But I told her I knew exactly what her kids were juggling. They were dealing with fear, uncertainty, and the feeling that her love came with conditions they could never quite meet. My mother-in-law started crying quietly, the tears just slipping down her face. My husband's sister's anger completely crumbled away. She looked small and frail. She whispered that she didn't mean to hurt them and that she thought they knew. I exhaled slowly and told her that children don't just know things, you have to show them. For a long time, nobody in the room moved. Then my mother-in-law cleared her throat, her voice still trembling. She said there was something else they needed to discuss. Her daughter looked at her with eyes full of tears and asked what else could be wrong. My mother-in-law swallowed hard and told her she was selling the house. She said she couldn't manage it anymore and that she would be moving into the space we had ready for her next door. The room felt like it tilted, like the gravity had changed. My husband's sister looked back and forth between us. She saw her mother leaning toward me and her brother's partner standing firm, while her children were already choosing peace over being near her. The realization hit her like a physical punch. She was completely alone. It wasn't because we had pushed her out, but because she had walked away from everyone long before any of us noticed. She sank onto the couch and buried her face in her hands, whispering that she had lost everything. For the first time, I didn't feel any resentment toward her. I just felt a quiet, aching sort of clarity. I told her she hadn't lost everything yet, but she was facing the consequences of her actions. I told her she could start over and become the person her children would actually want to come back to. My mother-in-law nodded slowly and said they were still her children, but I added gently that she had to actually be a mother to them. She didn't need to be their critic, their burden, or an empty space in their lives. She didn't argue or try to deflect. She just cried in a way that was raw and unguarded, without the fake persona she usually hid behind. For once, she was just a human being. Outside, I could hear my boys and her daughters laughing. I heard the sound of cardboard swords clashing in the yard. Life was still happening and waiting for people who were willing to choose a better way. My husband's sister finally lifted her face. Her eyes were swollen, but they looked clearer. She asked me if I thought they would ever forgive her. I hesitated and then told her the only truth that mattered. I said they might, but only if she gave them something real to come back to. In the weeks that followed, the house next door felt different. It was quieter and calmer, like the walls could finally breathe. My mother-in-law moved into the small extension we had prepared months ago. She was grateful to be close and relieved that she didn't have to manage a whole house that took all her energy. She spent her afternoons reading with my boys or teaching the girls how to do simple sewing stitches. The laughter coming through the open windows sounded like things were healing. The girls adjusted to living with their father much easier than we expected. When they came to visit, they walked with lighter steps and didn't curl their shoulders inward anymore. They helped me cook in the kitchen without looking over their shoulders to see if they were going to be criticized. They talked about school, their new friends, and how nice it was to have quiet evenings where no one was yelling in frustration. It was the kind of change you don't see all at once, but you notice it in small glimpses of who they were becoming. My husband and I finally felt like we could exhale. Our home didn't get any bigger, but it felt that way because it was more open and peaceful. Even my mother-in-law whispered thanks to us for giving her a place to land. As for his sister, she kept her distance. She sent some short messages to her mother, but there were no demands, no chaos, and no attempts to pull us into a storm. I didn't know if she was rebuilding herself or just hiding, but for the first time, I wasn't scared of the uncertainty. Looking back, the real breaking point wasn't the insult at dinner or the custody ruling. It was that quiet fear in a child's voice asking if love had limits. No family should ever make a child feel that way. If you've ever had to protect someone from the people who were supposed to love them most, you aren't alone. Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you want more family stories that remind us what real love should look like.